I've just completed normal mode of Final Fantasy VII Remake, which means my pledge starts properly, but before we move on, it's time to look back at all the story bosses, all 24 of them, and rank them. Welcome back, Classic Crew. I'm happy to say I've finally caught up on my Final Fantasy VII Remake playthrough. I'm at the same point that I was when I finished on the PlayStation 4 and abandoned the game. But now as part of this pledge, I am trying to 100%, which means I've unlocked hard mode, I've unlocked the DLC, I've unlocked going back to the old chapters to finish all the collectathons, so the real challenge starts now. Everything I will be playing from this point on will be new. But before I move on, I wanted to look back at the 24 boss fights I fought through the story and rank them from A rank all the way to WTF rank, because some of these bosses are way better than others, and I will be ranking them based on their overall theme, their mechanics, their music, and just how it felt as a player to take it on. Now, my experience might vary from yours, because in some, if I didn't understand the mechanic or couldn't figure it out, that means it would be frustrating. So this is by no means like a absolute list. It's just my own list after having played through this game twice. So there are other bosses, post-endgame bosses, DLC bosses, materia, summon bosses. I will save those for a future video when I actually complete those, because I actually don't know what they are. Yes, I have completed Fat Chocobo, Shiva, and Leviathan, but I will save those for the DLC video of this when I will cover all the bosses and complete my list. So without any further ado, let's get started with Scorpion Sentinel, the first boss of the game. And I will have to put this one as S rank, because this is the pinnacle of boss design. It serves as a tutorial. The music is amazing. It really recreates an old fight from a classic, iconic old fight from the original in a new way that really shows the player what this game now means. It focuses on positioning, on switching between your characters, using Cloud, using Barret. That nostalgia is getting flared up with all the amazing music, and the fact that you have all these phases is such a change from the original boss fight, which was just, its tail is up, don't attack it. Its tail is down, attack it. And unfortunately, we were not going to meet another S rank boss for a long time. But to start off the game, the first boss, this is, I really think, the best that they could have done for a first boss. Next boss we get is Roche. Now, some people say Roche motorcycle counts as a boss fight. I really don't think it does. It's just like a mini boss in my opinion. I'm going to put it on the list. I'm going to toss them up on C tier, because Roche is a little annoying. And on the bike, I don't really feel like it's that threatening. It's not that fun. You're basically just moving left to right. You're not using all of the mechanics the game has to offer. So this is kind of a footnote. But Roche, the next fight in, I think, Chapter 4, different story. We're going to move him up and put him in B tier. Because interesting new character. I feel they could have done so much more with this boss fight, or with this character through the story. They didn't, which I was surprised to, especially how they introduced them. But I feel this fight starts introducing you to the concept of countering. You don't need to counter for Roche, if I remember correctly, but countering goes a long way to making this fight easier. And other than that, it's not that much more, it's not iconic enough to me to put it up to A rank. So I leave it at B rank, which is kind of the nice, good, steady road boss that isn't really special in any way, but it's not bad. Next up, number 4, we got the Crab Warden. Now, Crab Warden, I'm also going to put B, even though I have a little bit of an affinity for machine bosses. This one does scratch that itch. I almost put it in A, but I feel I can't because of its mechanic is just lacking a little bit. It is great in everything else. The music in this boss fight is freaking fantastic. It's like a remix of the original boss fight. It's got kind of that crippling aspect that I like of bosses where, okay, you got to target the legs, and then when it's down, then you can bash on the main body. Like all of that, like breaking a machine down so that you can open up its weak point. That's just sweet, like boss mechanic for me. So honestly, this one, I'm not sure. It's not iconic from the story perspective. I think that's what's keeping it from being an A rank boss. But otherwise, I love this boss fight. It's B, but like we're gonna say B plus. Next up, we got the Airbuster. Now the Airbuster, I was kind of torn on where to put this, if it would be my next S tier or not, because the Airbuster, what I love about it is that it has a whole level dedicated to this boss fight, just building up the anticipation. Like the game and the story is really creating fear for the player of like, you're about to take on this big challenge. Are you ready for it? And the fact that you get to kind of weaken it and disable it because it is so powerful in a whole level really makes the payoff of the fight that much more exciting. And the music of this, again, fantastic. I don't know what track they used, but I love it. And the boss fight is great. However, this one lost points because, and this is mostly on me, I didn't know how to deal with phase 3 when it's floating away and I couldn't attack it anymore with Cloud. I was just frustrated because I was getting hit. I couldn't hit it back. I wasn't sure what I was doing. And so the Air Buster needs to go into A tier for my playthrough. Next, we have Reno, and Reno belongs right up there as an A tier. He would be like my A+, almost S tier. Reno's a fantastic character. Love his design. And I love the mechanic of this fight because this one you do need to counter or block to really get that opening and bash on Reno. I did not do this, I think, in my first playthrough, which makes me wonder how I beat him. But Reno is a really fun fight, super iconic, and I'm actually wondering if I should put him in S tier because I really did like Reno. He was good. Next up is the next Turk. We got Rude. Now, Rude does not live up to Reno quite the same way. He's all physical, and I don't think I figured out what his gimmick is other than putting Protect on yourself. I don't even know if you have Protect at this point. But I just remember it was mostly dodge, attack, And Reno as a character is cool, but his boss fight... did I say Reno? I mean Rude. His boss fight is just not as iconic as Reno, so he has to go a tier down, which is B tier. After that, we've got the Hell House. This was a boss I hated in my first playthrough because I didn't get it. I understood it a little bit in my second playthrough. We're putting Hell House in A tier simply because it's got a little bit of bullshit, so I can't put it in S tier. I love the fact that it's in an arena, it's a coliseum. How it gets introduced is freaking fantastic. It's a really fun mechanical fight, like where you have to figure out that you have to use the different spells on it. It has a lot of different phases. You got to be moving around a lot. So it's a very dynamic fight, and that's why I put it at A rank. Next up, we've got Abzu, and I, again, will say I have some bias. I prefer machine bosses over monster bosses. I know, right? Coming from Monster Hunter. So Abzu, we're putting him in B tier. Honestly, he doesn't really stand out to me in any way. It was an okay fight. It wasn't a bad fight. I don't have much to say about him, and so he stays in B tier with mediocrity. Next, we get into the cemetery or the graveyard ghoulie place where we fight the ghoul. Now, this one here is better than Abzu, but I'm still going to put it in B tier. I love the mechanic of having to switch between your magic and your physical attacks and knowing when to use what. The arena is kind of meh, where you have to run around all this like junks on the floor, but because of the mechanic, it gets it doesn't go down to C tier. Like if it had garbage mechanics, this would be in the C tier, but we're gonna give it the B tier. After the ghoul, we have Eligor, which I absolutely hated fighting this thing. I'm going to be putting Eligor in C tier, maybe even D tier, but I'm avoiding putting it in D tier simply because I feel a lot of it is on me. This fight was so frustrating. You know what? Forget it. This thing's going in D tier. It puts you to sleep, which is frustrating. It's flying all the time, so you can't hit it with your melee users easily. And when it's on the ground, you bounce off the wheels because you're not supposed to hit the wheels, apparently. You're supposed to like do some magic, and then when it staggers, that's when you go in melee. For my playstyle, I really didn't like this fight. Everything about it was frustrating, and then it's spamming lightning everywhere. D tier. Eligor, the only thing that's good for is stealing the Aerith weapon. Next, we have Reno and Rude together. So what do you do when you put A tier and B tier together? It doesn't make an S tier, unfortunately. It makes A tier. So basically, the two great fights that we've seen before just put together with a very like important part of the climactic story. A tier. I can't really say much because there's not that much more. It's just managing the two at the same time, which makes it that much harder. But otherwise, it's the Turks. So pretty good fight. Failed experiment after that, which again, this one is kind of poopy. I'm putting it at C tier because I didn't really care much for it. The music was kind of meh. And there's a part where it's like, oh, look, the door, go there. And I went there and I couldn't like figure out how to progress the boss fight until I accidentally hurt or killed its appendage. And that's what progressed the fight. So that wasn't noticeable to me, which made a really bad experience. So failed experiment, C tier boss fight. It wasn't clear what I needed to do. Next, we got Abzu and the Abzu Shouts, which I'm putting this one in D tier as well. While Abzu was okay and forgettable, when they put in the Abzu Shouts in here, which are little minions that I absolutely hate, and they give Abzu this massive, like pretty much party clearer. If you're in the wrong place, he just like throws sludge at the whole party. I hated this fight. It was just garbage. Quite literally, he throws garbage at you. I didn't like the fact that you had to kill the minion. I didn't like the fact that the minions were in there because they're just kind of BS enemies. And then having to deal with Abzu on top of that just made this fight completely a pain to get through. Next, we got Valkyrie as we climb up to go to Shinra HQ. Now, this one was rough on me. I had a lot of troubles. I'm putting it at C tier because I couldn't hit it comfortably. It's constantly flying. It can't be staggered easily. It's constantly like pinging you with these massive attacks that hurt. It has chasing lasers on you. It's just super annoying to fight. And I think I wiped. This was where I did my first wipe, I think. Or I almost wiped. I don't quite remember. Next up, we go into Shinra HQ to fight HO512. This one, it wasn't bad. It wasn't good. So I'm going to put it at B tier. I actually did enjoy fighting this, but it's just not an iconic boss. The music wasn't iconic. There was nothing really iconic about it. It's just a big like blob thing that spews poison in a comfortable manner and has some minions that you can slay. Just a good time, really. So in a 4-hour span, when my final stream, I actually knocked out 7 of these 24 bosses, which tells me this game has a weird pacing issue if most of it, like a third to a fourth of its bosses, are all packed in the final 4 hours of the game. But anyways, we met the Swordipede, which points for awesome name, but the fight was kind of meh in my experience. It was good when I was playing as Cloud and Brett, and then when it moved over to the girls, that's where the fight got really garbage. So C tier for Swordipede. Cool name, but not cool enough fight to go up the ranks. After that, we had Genova, the Dreamweaver, which I have to put at S tier because this fight, the first time and even the second time, it gives me goosebumps. It's such a cool fight that requires you to use your magic, your melee, your positioning, and it starts off like so dark and overwhelming. And then when you hit that, like, I think it's phase 2 or phase 3, you hit that crescendo and the music is just like, you get the Genova theme and it's just like pumping you up. It's done so freaking well, and the fact that it's an iconic boss like freaking Genova, the mechanics of it, this boss is just so well done. And that music is as soon as I finished it, I went back to like YouTube to find the OST so I could just listen to it. After that, we've got Rufus and Darkstar. Now, the first time I played the game, I did not understand this fight, but this time with chat's help, I learned how it's all based on counter positioning and specific attacks on Rufus. Once I understood this fight, I loved it. So I think this is S tier. I love that it's just you, Cloud, and Rufus, and that it's a one-on-one fight. I love how it's so mechanically precise that you have to know what to do. Even when I didn't know, I had to figure it out, and I pulled out my counter stance at one point, and people are like, don't use that, and then it worked, and it was like such a satisfying blow to Rufus. It's just like when it all connects, it's really rewarding to the player. It's really frustrating, though, if you don't know what to do, which is what was my original experience. So S tier for Rufus because that is just fantastic design. Really stands out from everything else and super iconic way to introduce the new villain for the next part. Next, we have the Arsenal, which is another fantastic machine. Not quite as great as the Sentinel though. So I'm going to put this one as an A tier because I really did love it. I love how it is breaking the wheels, breaking the cannon, taking advantage of the weak spot. But I had troubles destroying his shields. I couldn't figure out an efficient way to do it, which felt like the fight dragged on. So a few of these things kept the fight back from being an S tier fight just because I felt like it dragged on for my play style and I couldn't figure out enough exploits for it. After that, we go into the chase of the highway as we're escaping, and Motorball comes into play. Motorball is a super fun boss fight. Another A tier fight. It's another machine, and while the Roche motorcycle fight didn't leave an impact on me, Motorball was more intimidating, was more scary, but was also more fun and rewarding when you understood the positioning and breaking his wheels and just taking advantage of how you have to break this machine down in parts. So really enjoyed this, even though it's not a typical fight. Now we're getting into the super endgame bosses. So Whisper Harbinger, this is the only one that goes in the WTF tier because I hate this fight. You're constantly fighting the same 3 dudes, which are like pretty much just whipping you. Like you're trying to focus on one, the other 2 will gang up on you, and then you just keep beating them over and over again. They just respawn and respawn. It's really unrewarding for the player. I just really despise this fight. So WTF tier for Whisper Harbinger. Man, you suck. And what's a Kingdom Hearts boss doing in my Final Fantasy VII Remake? They couldn't come up with a better design for this thing. Then finally, of course, I can't not put Sephiroth at S tier because this is the epic finale of the game. He is our main villain. He's got everything that I needed in a boss fight. Like, you've got the climactic story aspect. You've got a very cool mechanic where you have to be precise in that it lets you do the one-on-one with Cloud versus Sephiroth. You get to use specific abilities against them. You have to use You have to dodge properly, and then you get your party in, and there's all these phases that you really get to use everything you've learned up to this point, which is fantastic as a boss mechanic. It really tests the player. And Sephiroth is such an iconic fight. You get the amazing music, the amazing phases. It just delivers on everything that I feel a fan could have hoped for with a rematch with Sephiroth after all these years. So S tier for Sephiroth. That's where I'm at. I still have several more bosses to fight and rank, so we're going to add them to this list. But for now, I don't know if it's up on the screen, but these are all my rankings of current bosses. Let me know where you agree, where you disagree, and I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Otherwise, I will see you on the next journal or on the next Final Fantasy stream. Until next time, keep it classy. Do 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 do. Subscribe.